other materials as they come up. So it might take us a little until next week to get this video up. It sometimes takes us a while to compress it and upload it. We do have several members joining us this evening. Those include Jenna Estep, our Community Development Director. I'm not sure if Don Vadran is here yet, but he is our Public Works Director, and I'm hoping he will join us. And I can't see the panelist list. Are you there? Thanks. So just to give a general overview of our agenda, I'm welcoming you. Thank you for coming. And we want to hear from you as we move forward. And we will be having, I'll give a brief overview. I think I've pretty much given it, and then I'm going to hand it over to Lisa, and she will talk about some of the history we've had of things we've already approved for this development, the site development and planning actions and environmental review, and how this proposal is being looked at in the additional supplemental environmental impact statement is being done tonight. And some of you may not be familiar with a planned action is, so she will talk about that a little bit. Lisa Greeter is from Burke Consulting. She's the project manager of our consultant team that we brought together to look at the areas that we thought needed to be examined based on the request and what wasn't already covered in the initial planned action environmental impact statement. After Lisa provides a little bit of history, we're going to turn it over to the representative from the master developer, which is their attorney, Nancy Rogers, and she'll provide some remarks on their behalf. And then we'll turn it back to Lisa, who will go into more details about some highlights of what we found and the areas we focused on and what changes and proposed mitigations, if any, we made. So I think I've covered everything. Thank you again for joining us, and let us know if you have any problems, and definitely use the chat thing if you need help or something. Thanks. Lisa, are you ready?
Sure. Thank you, Anne. So I think Anne has covered this, but I'll just share a couple points on the purpose of the meeting. We want to share the proposal that we're studying in the draft supplemental EIS. This community meeting is something we're holding to fulfill a State Environmental Policy Act requirement for a community meeting about the planned action before the hearing. We'll talk about the schedule in general towards the end of the slides. But the idea is that later in March and in April, there would be additional legislative meetings with the Planning Commission, and then following that with the Council. So this is an early review of the contents of the draft EIS and supplemental EIS and the purpose of the planned action. And the comment period for the supplemental EIS has been a 30-day comment period, and it closes on March 4th. And we'll bring back that information a little bit later, along with Anne's contact information. So the planning history, Anne mentioned that the site has been under review for, and planned for alternative uses to the mine for a number of years. So this history starts in 2012, talks about the Northern Gateway study. That was a review of both sides of the interchange on the east side of Covington. That led to a focus on the south side, the Hawk property. As Anne mentioned, that was the original name for the sub-area plan. And there was an environmental impact statement prepared at that time in 2013, along with a planned action ordinance that was approved in early 2014. After the approval of that sub-area plan, which looked at mixed uses for the property, there was an annexation and a development agreement and a zoning map amendment, boundary line adjustment, and there was an addendum on the SEPA process. Just to give you some history here, those photos in the lower left were out of a public engagement process with that initial Hawk property sub-area plan that looked at a variety of land uses on the site, and each group came up with different concepts that got melded into alternatives, and we'll talk about the alternatives a little bit later. But it's important to know about this 2013 environmental impact statement because that's the document we're supplementing, and that set in motion the evaluation of that mixed-use development. So then following work on the development agreement, later the city received a docket application in 2018 that addressed some potential text amendments to the comprehensive plan that would increase the development potential on the site. The footprint of the development we'll talk about a little bit later. It's staying the same. Is within that development footprint, there would be additional square footage of commercial and additional residential units. Because of that, the city wanted to conduct a supplemental environmental impact statement, and through that process, develop associated amendments to the planned action ordinance. We'll talk about the contents of that planned action in a little bit, but it does include thresholds of development and mitigation measures. So it's being looked at the same time. So now in early 2021, the draft supplemental EIS has been published. There's this 30-day comment period, and then we'll be going through the legislative process. Before the council acts, there will be a final EIS, and it will reflect comments and responses made during the 30-day comment period, and the Planning Commission will get a chance to weigh in on the recommendations for the text amendments before the council deliberates and makes a determination. So this slide here is quoting from a vision statement in the comprehensive plan, in the initial Subarea plan, really. And it shows what I was mentioning, one of the concepts that came out of that early public engagement and 2013 supplemental EIS. But the vision is really for an urban village that would include regional shopping and employment opportunities and housing opportunities, and offer public recreation like parks, natural open space, a pond, and bike and pedestrian trails. So that was the vision when the plan was adopted back in early 2014 following that EIS. And then this is the master development plan that's in the development agreement. And really this vision is still holding from the initial high-level concept to this master development plan. And this master development plan is still a guiding concept for the growth that is being analyzed in the supplemental EIS. And you might want to weigh in here, but basically we had to translate the large parcels associated with the mine site into zoning districts that would be an implementation for this high-level concept. So there's this regional commercial mixed use, multifamily residential, and R12 for the majority of the site. And then where there's more sensitive areas, R6.
Yes, so I think that's correct. The majority of the R6 site is area that will not be developed, with the exception of some trails and a roadway that will connect the 204th, which we actually are already underway. So that's exciting. We've started off-site some of the work. There will be a subdivision probably proposed, not probably, it will be proposed, that will abut the existing Maple Hills, that they're going to put some single-family homes there, but we'll be moving forward with most of this along. There is an existing, I'm sure we have some people from the residences to the south of here. There is an existing green buffer that will have a trail in there between the residential uses and the development within the sub area, and that's not changing. And I'll let Nancy also speak to this, but the overall thing is that they're not actually increasing the footprint. They're going to still be staying within the area and protecting the wetlands, but they are going to make it more dense. So they're proposing to have more development, so going up and maybe different. And again, when they first brought this in, it was before COVID, so I think things always change, but that is the plan. There's not any additional part of the site that will be moved around or disturbed. But other than that, yes, they are just a future looking out. We have started on 204th development there. They have property acquisition for any to do that development. The next phase will probably be SR 18 improvements. And then we will also, the next part will be the actual development within the sub area. And my understanding is that we are, it's rainy here, so we're letting some of the soils dry out so we can continue to fill. They are currently doing, still bringing in fill material to finish their and complete their reclamation permit for the site. So I think that's it. There's in that lower right-hand corner, there is a picture of the master development plan that's in the current development agreement and is pretty much consistent with what we had in the initial sub area, and then subsequently interpreted into the zoning that implements it. And I believe we're still on track for that. So go ahead.
So this is a quick summary of the request. There were proposed text amendments that would change certain exhibits in the land use and economic development element. They are really changing the development levels, but not the footprint, as Anne mentioned. So I think I'll pass it over to Nancy, and if there's anything you want me to go back to, Nancy, I can do that.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Nancy Rogers, and I am a land use attorney working with Oak Point, the developer of the Lakepointe project. Happy to be here today. I just have a couple brief remarks because today should I hope be about hearing from the public and getting public comment, and I want to make sure we have time for that. This is, again, an approved project, as you saw in the history that we walked through. It's currently approved for a mixed-use development of 1,500 homes and 850,000 square feet of commercial space. The new proposal would increase the amount of development by just 250 additional homes and about 470,000 additional square feet of commercial space. This is going to be achieved, as I think Lisa and Ann both mentioned, not by increasing the footprint of the development or the size of the development, but rather by building up. We realized as we were proceeding through the development plans that that was entirely possible and made sense in terms of the density for this area and encouraging an even more vibrant mixed-use center. We've also been able to do additional work on the mix of potential uses and are looking at a number of restaurants, entertainment uses, shopping, as well as the residential, plus of course, the center point of the development, the lake itself, which will have multiple publicly available recreation amenities. Today we're here to talk about the supplemental environmental impact statement, and that environmental impact statement, of course, evaluates the potential environmental impacts of this incremental change, not the entire project, because the entire project, the project is already an approved project, but it's for that incremental change of the additional development units and the additional commercial square footage. And I think it does a lengthy, thorough job of analyzing those impacts. And again, if we hear any public comments about things, we'll work with the city to respond to those in the final environmental impact statement. I want to just conclude these super brief remarks by saying thank you to city staff and consultants for getting us to this point today. And again, to say that I look forward, as well as the other Oak Point team members who are part of this Zoom meeting, all look forward to listening to the public comments today. Thanks.
Thanks, Nancy. Some highlights about our approach on the State Environmental Policy Act documentation. We started with the 2013 EIS as a base, and then, as Nancy mentioned, focused on the amended proposal to look at the increase in the development thresholds. And I'll have a table coming up that has the numbers that Nancy referred to. We also wanted to use this as a way to confirm or amend mitigation measures, and then have this as a part of the process to share with the public and the City Council and Planning Commission to help make an informed decision about those text changes that are being proposed in the comprehensive plan. So again, this is the 2013 maximum urban village proposal. because it was approved in 2013, it becomes our base, our future baseline. It's considered a no action alternative under the State Environmental Policy Act. It doesn't mean nothing will happen. It means it's what's currently in place. And it does allow for the growth and development of this area to fit the vision of the plan as a regional commercial center and housing with amenities. And then, yes?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but I've had a couple of questions come in. I just want to clarify. This is actually already previously approved sections, but can you point out where the single family subdivision on the eastern side, do you see that there? And then down below in the, so there's an area there that to the south of that is the existing Maple Hill subdivision. And to the right of it, I believe it's called Cedar Downs Park. There's some open space and trails. That is an existing, it's always been considered a little area that they will actually put in single family. There's what we understand they'll bring in. There's not an active permit in for that. As you can actually see on the top one, we thought the road would be coming in more from the corner. It's actually adjusted to be more in line with what's showing on the bottom there, but it will only be on the eastern side of 204th once it enters the sub area, and we expect it to be around 22 single family homes. So again, we don't have a formal permit in, but I wanted to clarify that this is not new. It's been there before, and it's actually not something they're proposing to increase in that area.
Sure.
Sorry.
So 2013 is our future baseline, and then the 2018 proposal. This master development plan is the same as what was shown before. It just has some calculations. You'll see this map in the document itself. So this is a tabular view of the currently approved maximum urban village that is our no action, and then the proposal that Nancy referred to. So the residential dwellings approved are 1,500, and the commercial square feet 850,000. And so a bump in the residential to 1,750, and an increase in the commercial square feet also at 1.32 million square feet. So the master development plan stays the same. That's what we mean when we say the footprint is staying the same. We're holding to that initial concept in the sub-area plan and in the master development plan that is attached to the development agreement. So it's the increase in square footage and dwellings within that same footprint that we are focused on. So the supplemental EIS, it did not cover every single topic that was already covered in 2013. Because the footprint was staying the same, it focused on areas of difference, either because the development was increasing or because we had new information about a topic that we wanted to share. So the topics covered in the supplemental EIS include earth and groundwater, air quality, plants and animals, land use, and consistency with plans and policies, transportation, noise, public services, and utilities. And for each topic, the format is similar to 2013. It follows the SEPA rules to share the affected environment, potential impacts, mitigation measures, and if there's any residual significant unavoidable adverse impacts. Some of the summary of topics we covered that are in chapter 1 of that document at the link that Anne talked about earlier. At a high level, with the intensification of commercial space and added jobs and residences, there could be some increases in air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, but we largely found that the range and table of mitigation measures would still address that. Because there'd be an increase in population and jobs, there would also be an increase in demand in public services and utilities. There are still some similarities. The amount of impervious area would not be substantively different because the development footprint is basically the same. As we talked about earlier, there's continued protection of critical areas on the property. There is some updated information here and there. For example, there's been additional design of the wildlife crossing. So there's more known and information that WDFW was able to help provide regarding species that the crossing should be designed to. That's just one example. So we updated some of that information. And then transportation trips are the same. The development would be held to the same maximum threshold of transportation trips. So even though the development is increasing, the mix of uses is allowing for a similar number of trips. And then the things that need to be resolved through the decision-making process: amendment of the comprehensive plan and amendment of the planned action ordinance. That's an appendix to the plan. In the future, there would need to be an amendment to the development agreement for consistency, because it would be holding to those lower numbers that I mentioned here. That's what's referenced in the development agreement. So at some future date, it would need to be amended. So the other thing we wanted to share was the planned action ordinance. There was one approved in 2014, and we're proposing some amendments to that because of the new level of land use development and the need to address updated mitigation measures. So while the planned action ordinance is proposed for amendment and shows the potential new growth levels and the new or updated mitigation measures, until the development agreement is amended, the initial approval for 1,500 dwelling units and 850,000 square feet of commercial would remain in place. This graphic on the right-hand side is just a visualization of the steps we've been talking about. We've been reviewing the docket proposal, preparing the supplemental EIS, developing the planned action ordinance amendments. It will go through Planning Commission and City Council review and adoption. Once it's adopted with the amendments, it would continue as it has before. Any development proposal that comes in would be reviewed for consistency. Is it in the scope of what was covered? Does it fulfill the mitigation measures? Then yes, you go ahead with the local permit process. If for some reason there needs to be additional environmental considerations, there's a way to do that under the planned action. And just as a summary of what the planned action is intended to do, it's a tool that's been in place for a number of years under the State Environmental Policy Act. It really is shifting environmental review from that permit review stage to the planning stage, which is great when you have a master plan development that's going to be implemented over a number of years. It allows you to look holistically at the property, figure out the amount of development, and that's identified in that ordinance. And then, as long as the incremental phased development is consistent, they wouldn't need to repeat that analysis in the EIS or supplemental EIS. But they still go through the right proposal permit review. So if it requires a building permit, a construction permit, or site plan review or some other city permit, it will still go through that permit review process. Here's some high-level examples of what some of the mitigation measures are in the planned action. This is one that's continuing from today's planned action from the 2013 EIS. Part of the mitigation is to implement that Covington connector and the interchange improvements. So that's being retained. You'll see in the document. One that's been adjusted is around the wildlife crossing design, because as I mentioned, we had some additional information from the applicant's consultants, as well as the State Department of Fish and Wildlife that helped us refine that mitigation measure. And then based on increased demand, there's a mitigation measure about addressing training of police over time to be in place as the center grows. Those are examples, and you're welcome to look at the appendix of the supplemental EIS, and that will show you what some of the adjustments are. So there's still time to provide comments on the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. It started on February 2nd, but it goes through March 4th, 5 p.m. And you would send written comments to Anne. Her email address is below, or the street address is here. Email is preferred if possible. So I think, Anne, we're at a Q&A point. I know you've been answering questions along the way.
Yeah, I was going to pull up some of those. I mean, I believe everyone can see this. We had some questions just about what the RCMU initials meant. That is a zoning designation. It stands for sort of the highest density and hopefully the most pedestrian friendly and active area in the new urban village. And that stands for Regional Commercial Mixed Use Zone. It would allow for multifamily, hopefully on top of commercial, but again, we have had no applications in and won't probably until the road's further along. But at the very end, we will show you the Lakepointe's website. They have a nice website with some ideas they have for development down there that we will look at when the time is right. Let's see, other questions that came up is, I don't know if Dawn wants to address one. There are some, as I said, we're developing and 204th, there's a comment about, oh, thank you. Ryan just told me you guys can't see the comments. So we had a question come up about the main road being expanded, and I assume that means the Kent Kangley 272nd. If Don wants to speak, he can share what's going on there, but part of the improvements off-site will be some improvements to the intersection there with 204th, including a light down the line and some road improvements. And there's also a separate project the city is doing on Kent Kangley to expand it.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Anne.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, as our first phase of our Coming to Connector project, which was mentioned, that is building a roadway between Highway 18 and at the 256th interchange, and going through the Lakepointe development, going up to 204th by Maple Hills, and then down to Kent Kangley SR 516. So as Ann indicated, there'll be improvements at the intersection of 516 and 204th with a traffic signal there and some channelization improvements. And then there's also at the other end at the SR 18 interchange, there are improvements at the termini of those ramps, and those will be roundabouts at those two termini at those locations. And then a roadway, obviously, that I mentioned, connecting all of that, which will help with some alternatives for traffic flow through that area.
Lisa, do you see the comment that someone, maybe you wanted to address that as part of the environmental review, we did check in, and Dawn, you maybe too, about the services provided there. And we have checked with service provider to make sure that adequate public services and utilities will be provided. So someone had a question about, will the additional load required to support this developer be sustainably provided? And the power supply, have we checked with them? I can say we have provided information to PSC and invited their comments.
That's right, Anne. They're on the distribution list along with many other service providers so that they have a chance to review, and they were given that same opportunity in 2013.
And we do have an existing section in the development agreement, and I think it's actually referenced in the initial planned action that does ask them to look at some sustainability features as they move forward in their development.
Yeah, through the air quality and greenhouse gas emissions mitigation, there's several that relate to energy conservation. And then another question I see is Cedar Creek Park going to be impacted by the single family homes? It will not be going into Cedar Creek Park. Obviously, they'll develop on their property. We do have a connectivity into their site in two locations, one from that subdivision
and also down the slope, connecting into a trail that will also connect into that site. And we've done that at both the request and coordination with King County to provide some regional connectivity, not into the subdivision so much, but the lower site will go into one that can connect through on a regional level, but there will be a neighborhood connection into the existing sites in Cedar Creek Park. So.
Anything else, Anne, that you want to touch on?
We can just follow up that PSC is aware of the question someone's asking. PSC is aware that this development, and they will be putting in, Dawn, I forget what it's called, like conduit to do that. We've met with them in person and they're aware of it, and they will be approving all the substations that need to be put in and utilities to go in. So
they're putting in the necessary infrastructure as part of the roadway that's going in to feed those the growth and development that's occurring. So they are part of the project as far as putting in necessary infrastructure, and that includes other utilities as well. As aware of that.
Yeah, and I remember pre-COVID, we met with them. I'm recalling this now in 2019 in person to discuss some of the, as we're designing the road to make sure that they're accommodated. And then there's a follow-up question, Dawn, about the Williams pipeline and what the city is doing to address the work and our coordination, our detailed coordination with Williams pipeline to go over that in a safe manner.
So in regards to Williams pipeline, the roadway will be going over the pipeline, and we're actually working with Williams pipeline right now as far as they are going to basically need to dig up their expose, I should say, their gas line, just to make sure that and test that integrity of the line to make sure that that is fine before the roadway is built over it. So that is something that we are working with Williams Pipeline right now about. And so they will actually do that work to make sure that structural integrity of the line can handle the roadway being built over it. And any improvements or whatever needs to be done at that time will be done to allow that to take place.
Ryan, it looks like someone has their hand raised. I've never, did you see that? I'm not sure how to let them talk.
They have to unmute themselves and
Okay.
are ready to go.
So, and I lost them. Let's see, where is she? Maybe it was Zanara Carter? Did you have a question? Oh, here, I'll unmute you. You have to, Zanara, you have to unmute yourself. Okay. Oh, her hand went down. Okay. Again, you're welcome to send me any emails too to follow up. If you have any questions, or if Nancy would like to speak on any of the comments that have been raised, we've sort of covered it. The website has the full environmental impact draft supplemental impact statement is on there, and we have the separated appendices are also available to look at there. There's a lot to read, and we do welcome comments. It is easier because we are telecommuting, a lot of us, to get it by email, but I do have colleagues that can scan letters that come in and will accommodate this too. So it looks like Jesse wants to ask a question, so I'm going to let you go.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, who's this?
Jesse.
Okay, Jesse, sorry.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be able to ask this question live. It was hard to figure out how to type it. Just since we're all here, I would love just some insights. Could you share with us about sort of behind the scenes, what goes on when we're talking about big impacts like this, especially with road uses and things like that? how is that coordination done across, is it done at a King County level? So like Covington to Auburn and the things that are being, like the roads that are being utilized, if there's impacts, is that covered at a county level, or how do we ensure that we are managing the traffic from just a sheer volume standpoint?
So, Anne, I wonder if maybe Josh could comment on that a little bit. We use the city's model, but it does account for regional trips, I believe.
Yeah, so I can jump in there. The city maintains a citywide, and it's really more of a region-wide travel demand model. When development like this comes in and applies, we add that land use and the resulting trips into this travel demand model. And the model is set up and calibrated to predict where drivers are coming from and going to, given the different land uses. You can imagine predicting human behavior is not an exact science, but we do take our best educated guesses at where those trips will come from and go to. And the model is built off of existing travel patterns and existing behaviors, and assuming that in the near term, those behaviors won't change greatly. So in times like this with COVID, the demand models do not handle that type of thing well, but they do handle new urban growth in areas typical like this.
So does that mean thank you for that. So does that mean like roads that are going to get higher usage, in essence, are going to get higher investment in the infrastructure to handle that usage?
Yeah, these models tell us kind of where those vehicles are coming from and going to. Mm-hmm. And then subsequently, we look to make sure that the roadways and the intersections can handle that mm-hmm. increase in demand. And it's based off of the city's operational standards at each of those intersections, not wanting to have any vehicles wait over a certain amount of seconds of delay on average for an intersection, or that the volume of traffic that we're predicting doesn't exceed the capacity of the intersection. And in the case of Lakepointe, there were some intersections that were expected to go over capacity or beyond the city's standards. And there are mitigation requirements put on the developer. As each phase comes in, they're going to be looking at and confirming that none of those capacity mitigations are required yet. And then if they are required, they'll be required to implement those capacity mitigations before that phase of development gets built.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So I guess my last question about that, we would be in our location more impacted by something like 10 trails, and we think of roads that a lot of these roads don't even have traffic lights. So, but the sheer volume of cars speeding by certainly impacts our safety of our homes and everyone that lives around here. So that that's just an interesting thing to consider when we're not really right in the middle of the city.
Thank you. So Josh and Don, there's another question, I'll read it out loud from Lynn. It says, while the Covington connector and interchange will serve the immediate area, have you considered regional transportation impacts from the Lakepointe development project, specifically commuters from 10 Trails and Lakepointe development equaling high traffic volumes and roadways not designed to accommodate them? I think Josh touched on that. Did you want to comment more on that? We have done extensive coordinating, I will say.
Yeah, the analyses that we've done have included developments in adjacent cities and the surroundings. We also, we've worked with Puget Sound Regional Council, PSRC, to understand the growth in the adjacent cities and within the region there. And as that growth increases in the adjacent cities, we're also expecting it to hit, the larger throughways through Covington, 272nd, SR 516, that those larger facilities will see an uptick with that regional growth. but the smaller facilities don't typically see it. That's more your local citywide growth. But both of those are accounted for in the analysis that has been done.
And I'll just say that the work that's done on SR 516, also Kent King Layer 272nd, and the interchange work we are working with, and both of those areas were reviewed and I think approved technically, the 272nd, and they definitely, WashDOT is doing extensive review and approval of the interchange. So they're involved with the sizing of all that too. And then Don, let's see, there was a question, and I think we've raised, there's some, I live just below the 256 ramp from SR 18. How is the predicted noise levels determined for 2035? And we do have a section with noise addressed in there. Maybe that's more of a Lisa question.
Sure. Yeah, section 3.6 of the draft supplemental EIS has a noise evaluation. It uses a FHWA, Federal Highway noise model, and it adds, the growth is basically growth in trips or land uses added in to add basically more noise source, and then review based on different points on the property what that might mean. And I think too, the Covington connector and interchange have been under evaluation as well, because they're further along in the design process. And there's been some supplemental noise evaluation associated with that.
Yeah, I think that's correct. There's been noise evaluations and actually some mitigation done on 204th, and the initial planned action ordinance actually has some comments already about residential uses and sensitive receivers that we've looked at, and have the developers, they come in and propose things, will address and do a more detailed level analysis.
And just kind of getting down a little bit into the nuts and bolts of that, it's larger heavy trucks create more noise than the smaller vehicles. And so through the travel demand software, we can predict what those traffic volumes are going to be out in 2035 and what that vehicle fleet is expected to look like in 2035. Again, doesn't necessarily account for an increase in electric vehicles, that type of thing, which are typically quieter. So it's kind of a worst case scenario that we're looking at with our current methodologies. That being said, that's how we're getting out there to 2035. It's that prediction of traffic demands and the associated volume levels or noise levels from each of those different types of vehicles.
There's a question from Matt Graham. Are there plans to update the schools to handle growth, zones or facilities? And I will just say from the beginning, we have coordinated with the Kent School District, and actually at one point, the area that we ended up annexing that became part of the sub-area was in Tahoma School District, and they've done a transfer there. So it's all in the Kent school districts, and they are on our distribution lists and are participating, and we've been told that they can accommodate it. Lisa, do you want to follow up on that?
I think that does a good summary, and if you want to see the analysis, it's in section 3.7 of the document. One good way to read the document too is to review the summary and then the in chapter 1, and then see where you want to dive further in. I'm referring to chapter 3 because that's where a lot of the detailed analysis is. 3.7.
I think that's a good point that Lisa says, that if you go to our draft supplemental EIS, you'll see the first, I think 27 pages really are a summary, high level, and it touches all the things we looked at and who we contacted. And then you can look more details further on, and you can also see our distribution list, which is at the very end too, that we have shared this analysis with, but we've also been working with them all along. I think those are mostly the ones about this. There's some individuals that ask personal, like about their questions. And Dawn, do you, not to put you on the spot. Oh, the 191st Street improvements that will go in there. We can just tell you that was heavily discussed and commented on. You could actually go back and look at our 2013 documents. It will be the last area improved as far as the street improvements. They have to actually have the coming connector constructed and operational before they can connect the 191st Street so that we don't have cut through traffic. And we have language in there and an expectation that the master developer will work with the city and the community to put in traffic calming measures to make sure that it's done in a manner that is intended for local access so that people can drive from that adjacent subdivision into that area and go enjoy what they're going to be providing. Don, do you want to just do a summary? Maybe you already did this, but a summary of when, like timing of 204th and groundbreaking. Do you know, or maybe the master developer also wants to add into that, but if you're available, Don, to.
Yeah, I kind of added that, but basically the timeline for our project, and I think Ann put some links in there in some of the answers, but so our existing 204th project that's underway right now that goes from SR 516 up to the Maple Hills, that is expected to be completed late fall this year. That's about the timeline, somewhere in there towards the end of the year for that to get done. The next piece is actually the SR 18 interchange area. We actually are calling that phase 3, but it will be probably be the second phase that's actually built. That we're hoping in the coming months to get that out to bid, and would probably be about a year timeline or so for that to be completed. Some of that is coordination with DOT, the Washington State Department of Transportation, to get all the approvals for that. So that is what we're dealing with right now with portions of that. So we're hoping, like I said, sometime by summer or so to hopefully be going on that. And then what would be the phase 2 or the section in between, we're hoping in the spring of next year to have that portion going, and that would probably be a year or so on that phase as well. So probably 2023, that timeline for everything to be completed.
And then I think the master developer, it says, when is the expected date to break ground on the actual Lakepointe area? And again, we probably will see some development of the single family residential buildings in the residential area on the east side of the property earlier, but they won't be developing the commercial development down in the Subarea until the road is actually constructed and accessible. Oh, Dawn, do you want to touch about the funding for the roads?
Yeah. So yes, the funding's been secured for all the roads. It's actually fully funded between the funding that was received from the legislature, 24 million. There's a couple of transportation improvement grants. I think that's totals 6 million, and then the developer also has a portion of that too. So yes, the project is fully funded.
I don't see any more questions. Nancy, did you want to say anything or in conclusion, or Jenna?
I didn't have any more remarks. I didn't know if there was going to be a separate public comment section of this, or if that was the Q&A. I was a little confused by that. Sorry.
We're definitely available if someone wants to give formal public comment now too, but we'll be sort of summarizing the comments that came in.
And Anne, I don't really have anything to add other than the question regarding the funding of the roads. Just to clarify, this is all the funding secured for the roads that we talked about. All the roads that will be internal to the Lakepointe development will be developed by the developer incrementally as development happens throughout the life of the development process. So just to kind of add to that. Otherwise, good questions. Thank you.
Well, looks like we have another question from Steve.
Does you want to ask it live?
Oh, there it is.
Okay. Don, can you see that? It says the section of 204th from 516 to where it curves westward through the woods. What will its configuration be? Do we have those posted?
So I'm assuming that we're talking about the area northwest of Maple Hills. And as far as what, as it comes down that, we obviously have to bring up material to build that roadway as it comes down off of the hill. We are trying to minimize the impact of the critical areas in that. So we are kind of narrowing the footprint without as much as we can with still having, the lanes to get through there and that type of thing. So I think, I'm assuming that's the piece that you're referring to. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to have, still has 2 lanes, sidewalks. I think at that location, as it comes through the area coming off the hill, I think we've tried to, the separated planter strip between the roadway and the sidewalk, I think those are removed, and no planted median in that area as it comes down the hill. But then as it gets down back to the bottom, everything widens back out as far as those amenities.
Looks like Steve has one more question regarding 204th becoming 4 lanes at some point as it approaches Lakepointe.
As it gets down into feeding the development, yes, it opens up to 4 lanes to serve the traffic coming in and out along that the development in that. So yes, it does widen out, and those are all things that have been looked at as far as modeling and serving that based on the anticipated use.
There's a question about the timing of this. And again, I think that's up to the developer and what the market does. We do have a development agreement in place now that was approved in 2017 for 15 years with a 5-year extension, and we'll see what happens. So I think they would like to get it done sooner than later, but that would be really up to them and the timing. And then there's a subsequent question for the EIS. What is the breadth of the area studied for the noise impact? And I do believe that was studied. There is a section in the supplemental that touches on that using, Lisa, maybe you can touch on the.
Yeah, it focused on the potential for sensitive receivers on the Lakepointe site, because some things were being proposed, like assisted living or a hotel. So those were touched on, but as Anne mentioned, in the original 2013 EIS, there was a requirement to do some noise studies, not only on site where there's residential potential, but southward where there were some existing homes and the need for the offsite improvement as part of the Covington connector. And as Ann mentioned, that's a requirement, you know, for those phases. And then Ann, I believe with the interchange, there's been a little bit more review of some abutting properties to where the interchange may be.
Yes.
But it's more in the rural area, I would say there.
Yeah, and so that there'll be a separate SEPA analysis for the interchange, and there is a noise evaluation that's gone into that too, and that hasn't been submitted yet. I know that they're working on that, but we know that they are looking at the potential impacts of that road improvements to that interchange. So that's coming soon, next month or two, I hope. And let's see. So, yeah, I would just encourage everyone to really read the overview. If, let's see, Lisa, can we show them? So the website is covingtonwa.gov and then / Lakepointe. So that's a really good area to start with, and scroll down to the section that talks about the supplemental environmental impact statement, and you'll find links to much of the information that we've looked at for this.
And there does seem to be one more question up there from Ralph.
Again, so the interest is off the ramps to this project. And Dawn, you can help. I know that there were noise walls. This was examined. Those are both outside of the areas of the sub area. The 204th did actually put up a sound wall that's up there now. I think it's constructed. And then the future homes that will be built within the sub area off of 204th before it turns into the Covington connector. There are some existing wording in there that they need to provide an analysis of what mitigation needs to happen for those homes in there. And over at the interchange, again, we will be looking at that. So the value, we do not, that is not part of the analysis as far as
yeah, the EIS is focusing on natural and built environment impacts, and the SEPA doesn't look at economic considerations.
So, someone asked about looking at the analysis of SR18. Oh, looks like someone already answered that. So just that when we look at the interchange analysis, we also look at the existing environmental documents, and we either use information from that when we evaluate it, or we can even adopt it or reference it with that. So.
I think there's one last question from Steve, or one more question from Steve, I think.
So Dawn, Steve, I think we've talked about this.
Yeah, we've talked about this a couple times, Steve, in email and things like that. So as we've said before, if that is going to be impacted, that culvert, and if it needs to be covered or anything along those lines, and it impacts your property, we will be in touch with you if that needs to be done. So those are things that are kind of separate from this, but we'll be addressing that if that's something that needs to be done.
And then our last one, we're going to hopefully wrap this up, is the entire development only going to have 2 points of access? There will be the Covington connector that will connect from 204th through the site to SR18 and through. There's also going to be connection to the neighborhoods to the south on 191st. And then there are probably like half a dozen or more actual pedestrian connections that are planned for this site. So people will be really hoping to encourage walkability. People can enjoy the existing trees along the buffer and get to the site by bike and walking too.
And it's probably fair to point out on 191st, the idea is for some traffic calming. So it would be a connection, but the main points of connection are our to SR 18 and to 204th.
Yeah, and that really is for local connection. There's no reason to have those people that live right there have to drive all the way around.
And it was shown to improve fire and emergency response.
Exactly. So I really appreciate everyone joining us. Feel free to email me, and we would like to have formal comments if you'd like to. And I think Lisa explained that those will be addressed in the final document. The deadline is March 4th.
March 4th at 5 p.m. Yeah.
So we'll compile those and address
I'll go back to your, this is, yeah, 5 p.m. March 4th. Here's Anne's contact info.
And since I don't know how everyone got the information for this evening, we do post on the web page. If you do write a formal comment, we will have your email address, and I will be able to send you information about that when we respond. But check the website. We put it on the website. We put it on the web page. We actually post in the newspaper, the Seattle Times now. So I think so. I really appreciate everyone joining us, and thank you, Nancy and Lisa and Josh and Don and Ryan and Daphne. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.